The mirror's edge. The gymnasium fell silent as Yuri Sakazaki stepped onto the polished wooden floor, her orange GI pristine against the harsh fluorescent lights. Steam rose from her breath in the unexpectedly cold air. Though the heating system had been working perfectly just hours before, something felt wrong. A heaviness that pressed against her chest like a physical weight. "Strange weather for a private training session," she murmured, adjusting her gloves. The building's caretaker had assured her she'd have the space to herself tonight, but the shadows seemed to writhe in the corners, pooling in places where no shadow should exist. A slow clap echoed from the darkness beyond the ring lights. Yuri spun toward the sound, her body automatically settling into a defensive stance. From the gloom emerged a figure that made her blood freeze in her veins. It was herself, or rather a perfect reflection walking toward her with measured steps. Same height, same build, same orange GI, even the way this doppelganger moved mirrored Yuri's own fluid grace. "Beautiful technique," the duplicate said, her voice carrying Yuri's own cadence but with an underlying coldness that made the real Yuri's skin crawl. "I've been studying you for so long." "Who are you?" Yuri demanded, though part of her already knew the answer would be something she wouldn't want to hear. The mirror, Yuri smiled. The same smile Yuri had practiced in countless photographs, but twisted somehow, like a reflection in water disturbed by stones. "I am everything you are, and everything you fear to become. I am the shadow that follows your every move, the doubt that whispers in your darkest moments." "Impossible," Yuri shook her head, but her training kicked in, cataloging her opponent's stance the way she held her hands. It was perfect, too perfect. Every nuance of her own fighting style reflected back at her with uncanny precision. "Nothing is impossible in the space between dreams and waking," the duplicate replied, beginning to circle Yuri like a predator. "I've watched you train, studied every combination, memorized every tell. Do you know what it's like to exist only as an echo of someone else's movements?" The temperature in the room dropped another degree. Yuri could see her breath now, small puffs of vapor that dissipated too quickly in the unnatural air. The fluorescent lights above began to flicker, casting the gymnasium in alternating light and shadow. "You're not real," Yuri said, but her voice lacked conviction. The figure before her was too detailed, too present to be a hallucination. "Real," the mirror, Yuri laughed, and the sound was like breaking glass. "I am more real than you know. Every time you've looked in a mirror during training, every time you've watched footage of your fights, you've been feeding me, giving me substance, without warning." The duplicate launched forward with a perfect Kouken, the projectile blazing through the air with the same orange energy that Yuri had spent years perfecting. Yuri barely managed to dodge, rolling to the side as the energy blast scarred the wooden floor where she'd been standing. "How?" Yuri began, but her doppelganger was already following up with a series of kicks that forced Yuri into a defensive retreat. Each movement was a perfect mirror of her own style, executed with inhuman precision. "You want to know how?" the duplicate asked between strikes, her breathing unnaturally steady despite the intensity of her assault. "Every fighter casts a shadow, Yuri. But some shadows grow hungry, some shadows learn to fight back." Yuri managed to create distance with a backflip, landing in a crouch as she tried to process what was happening. This wasn't just mimicry, this was her own style, turned against her with intimate knowledge of every weakness, every opening. "This is impossible," she repeated, but the words felt hollow even as she spoke them. "You keep saying that word," the mirror, Yuri said, her expression never changing from that cold, twisted smile. "Yet here I am, here we are, two halves of the same whole, about to discover which half is stronger." The duplicate rushed forward again, this time with a combination that Yuri recognized from her own training regimen. A faint high followed by a low sweep, but knowing what was coming didn't make it easier to counter when facing her own technique executed with perfect timing. Yuri barely managed to leap over the sweep, countering with her own Kouken. The two energy blasts met in midair, creating a brilliant explosion that sent both fighters skidding backward across the floor. "Interesting," the mirror, Yuri said, examining her hands as if surprised by the impact. "You're adapting faster than I expected. But then again, I suppose I should have expected that. After all, I am you." "No," Yuri said firmly, finding her footing. "You're nothing like me. You're cold, calculating. You fight without passion, without purpose." "Purpose?" The duplicate tilted her head, and for a moment her expression flickered, something almost vulnerable passing across her features before the cruel smile returned. "My purpose is to prove that technique without heart is superior to heart without perfect technique. Every sloppy form you've ever executed, every moment of hesitation in battle, I am the correction of those flaws." they circled each other again, both looking for an opening. The fluorescent lights continued their erratic flickering, creating a strobe effect that made it difficult to track movements. Yuri realized this was part of her opponent's strategy. The unstable lighting would make it harder to distinguish between the real attack and its reflection. "You're not a correction," Yuri said, her voice growing stronger with conviction. "You're a corruption. Fighting isn't just about perfect technique, it's about protecting the people you care about growing stronger through struggle and failure." "Touching," the mirror Yuri sneered. "Let's see how long that philosophy serves you." The duplicate launched into a devastating combination. Yuri's own Yuri Cho-upper followed immediately by a perfectly timed Ryo-ken. But this time, Yuri was ready. Instead of trying to counter technique with technique, she did something unexpected. She purposely stumbled. The mirror Yuri's follow-up attack sailed over her head as Yuri dropped into an unconventional roll, coming up behind her doppelganger with an elbow strike that caught the duplicate completely off guard. "What?" the mirror Yuri gasped, spinning to face Yuri with something like confusion in her eyes. "That's the difference between us," Yuri said, pressing her advantage with a combination that mixed her formal training with improvised street fighting techniques. "You can copy my moves, but you can't copy my ability to adapt, to make mistakes and learn from them." For the first time, the duplicate seemed genuinely threatened. Her perfect form wavered, and Yuri could see cracks beginning to form in her opponent's composure. Literal cracks, like fractures in a mirror. "Impossible," the mirror Yuri hissed, her voice taking on a distorted quality. "I am perfection. I am technique without flaw, and that's exactly why you'll lose," Yuri replied, channeling her ki into a more powerful Kōken than she'd ever managed before. "Because fighting isn't about perfection, it's about heart." The energy blast struck the duplicate center mass, but instead of simply knocking her back, it seemed to shatter something fundamental about her existence. The mirror Yuri's form began to fragment, pieces of her dissolving like shards of broken glass. "This cannot be," the duplicate gasped, her voice now echoing as if coming from a great distance. "I studied every technique, memorized every movement, but you forgot the most important thing," Yuri said, walking closer to her fragmenting opponent. "You forgot why I fight. It's not about being perfect, it's about being better than I was yesterday, about protecting the people I love, about never giving up even when facing the impossible." The mirror Yuri's form continued to disintegrate, but her eyes, those cold, calculating eyes that had been such a twisted reflection of Yuri's own, suddenly filled with something that looked almost like understanding. I was so focused on your technique that I never understood your spirit," the duplicate whispered, her voice becoming fainter with each word. "Perhaps that is why I could never truly be you." "You were never meant to be me," Yuri said gently. "You were meant to challenge me, to make me understand what really matters about my fighting style." The mirror Yuri nodded. A genuine smile, the first real expression Yuri had seen from her, crossing her lips as she faded completely. "Then I suppose I served my purpose after all." With those words, the duplicate vanished entirely, leaving only a few scattered shards of what looked like mirror glass on the gymnasium floor. The fluorescent lights stopped flickering, returning to their steady glow, and the temperature began to return to normal. Yuri stood alone in the suddenly quiet gymnasium, her breathing heavy but her spirit oddly peaceful. She looked down at the mirror shards at her feet, each one reflecting a different angle of her face, and realized something profound. She had always been afraid of her own imperfections, worried that her technique wasn't precise enough, that she wasn't disciplined enough compared to other fighters. But tonight, she had learned that those very imperfections, her ability to adapt, to improvise, to fight with passion rather than just precision, were what made her truly strong. "Perfect technique without heart is just an empty shell," she said to the quiet room, her voice echoing softly off the walls. "But heart without technique is just chaos. The real strength comes from finding the balance between them." She knelt and picked up one of the mirror shards, seeing her own reflection fractured but somehow more complete than it had ever been. In that broken piece of glass, she saw not just her flaws, but her potential to overcome them. As she left the gymnasium that night, Yuri carried with her a new understanding of what it meant to be a fighter. It wasn't about achieving perfection, it was about embracing the journey toward it, learning from every fall, growing stronger through every challenge. Behind her, the gymnasium fell silent once more, but in the darkness something glimmered briefly, not threatening this time but almost grateful. The mirror between dreams and waking had been crossed, and both sides were stronger for it. In the distance, the first light of dawn began to touch the horizon, and Yuri Sakazaki walked toward it with the confidence of someone who had faced her greatest fear and emerged victorious. not through perfect technique, but through the perfect understanding that imperfection itself could be a strength. The mirror's edge had been crossed, and she would never be the same.